Welcome to iPad Pros, the show all about using your iPad to be productive and get work done. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
Gladys in particular, pull in a map location and it will drop in 6 different items within that shelf you can then pull out and use wherever you want it.
Today on the podcast is Andy Nicolaides. We cover a wide range of topics including going paperless, photo management, task management, and much more. But first I have an exciting announcement to make. For those that want to support the podcast, you can now do this at patreon.com/iPadPros. The different price tiers all commemorate a special date in iPad history, including the launch of the original iPad and the launch of the original iPad Pro. Here's what to expect if you support me over at patreon.com/iPadPros. First off, I'm releasing a director's commentary version of my original iPad podcast, the iPad Possibilities Podcast. This is the podcast I ran from January 2010 to November of 2011 and released 224 episodes of it. It was a podcast all about the potential of the iPad platform. This will be released bi-weekly opposite from iPad Pros, so supporters will get a new iPad podcast from me every week. The first release is now available and includes the first 2 episodes. You'll hear on episode 2 a fairly in-depth discussion I had just a few days after the original iPad's announcement with a music professor who ran the Macintosh lab at Butler University. I found it fascinating to listen to this again after all these years and hearing what did and didn't come to pass. This special edition of the podcast that has not been available for many years now includes new introductions recorded for each episode. These introductions will provide some new thoughts for that episode and highlight some of my favorite moments of that episode. The podcast did have some guests, including Ken Case of the Omni Group, so you'll be able to hear from him in the early days of the iPad. Just like iPad Pros, these episodes will have chapter markers, making it easy to jump around. The other bonus for Patreon supporters at patreon.com/iPadPros is a brand new podcast entitled iPad Historia. This monthly podcast is a historical look at the iPad. I still own an original iPad and an iPad 2 running very old versions of the OS. I believe iOS 3 and 4. I'm excited to talk about the iPad and its early days in iPad Historia. The podcast will also serve as a place for newer moments like the release of the original iPad Pro and place it in context of the iPad's evolution over the years. The Patreon is most of all for those that feel like they do get value out of the work I do to produce iPad Pros and want to give back. No matter the tier you support there, it's incredibly meaningful to me. It would mean the world to me if you could just take a minute to visit patreon.com/iPadPros to check it out and hopefully support me there. If you do have suggestions for other perks, I'd love to hear your thoughts at iPadProsPodcast@gmail.com. Without further ado, here's my interview with Andy. Enjoy. We're joined today by Andy Nicolaides. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. Thanks for spending some time with me tonight. And the first thing I want to just ask you is if you could just introduce yourself and kind of what role the iPad plays in your life.
So my name's Andy Nicolaides. The iPad, for me, is essentially my second child. Maybe taking it a little bit too far, but it essentially is, though. It comes everywhere with me. I have a day job that doesn't involve the iPad to its full extent.
It involves Windows, as we'll get into in a little bit.
It does, unfortunately, yeah. There's still time, even within that, to get the iPad in there, so I use it quite frequently at work still. And for home, it covers everything else. So from media consumption, just films, reading, whatever, to managing my finances, tracking all my documents. I save pretty much everything. I don't have any paper documents if I can avoid it. Everything's scanned, saved to iCloud Drive.
Do you find yourself less reliant on your iPhone because the iPad plays such a big role in your life?
I do, yeah. Especially when I'm at home. I usually get home, put the iPhone down on the charger. It sits on there for the rest of the day. Once I'm home, usually the watch sits next to it getting charged. And then for the rest of the time, it's my iPad.
You see yourself becoming a 2 iPad person when the fall iPads are announced?
I think I will, yeah. I have some more desk space now. I sort of went to the iPad originally initially really just because of lack of space in my house. The 12.9 inch I'm hoping will pretty much be a desktop. It'll be in a little dock in my desk. Will generally sit there, I think, is the plan.
Now, you jumped into iPads in 2014 as your primary computer, is that right?
That is, yeah, that's right.
And you mentioned space being a big thing. Were there other reasons jumping to iOS? Was it just like I'm in a tiny apartment and this Mac is just too cumbersome to find a place for.
That's kind of where it started, yes. We had a house with a bare room, but my daughter was born in 2014. That space was obviously then taken up. We had a 27-inch iMac just sitting in the living room, gathering dust, essentially. Having a child, a new child, didn't have much time to do much with it anyway.
2014 was the year of the Mini 3 and the Air 2. So did you buy the current year at that point?
Yeah, I've usually been pretty much on top of them.
And the Air 2 was a substantial upgrade over the Air. That was probably like the first, I'd say, that was capable of being, for most people, or more people, a primary computer. It was the first one that did the multitasking split screen stuff, at least.
I've still got that Air. I use it for putting films on for my daughter and stuff in the car, but it's still, really capable for a lot of people. My mother-in-law's got one as well, and, that's her main thing she uses for home.
Now, you mentioned going like paperless in, our conversations before this. What's your workflow for being paperless on iOS?
For document scanning and stuff, I just use the Readle. I think it's just called Scanner Pro, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That pretty much covers majority of stuff I need it for, from just documents that I get in the post, I don't know, insurance documents or anything else really, to receipt tracking for expenses from work and everything like that. And it stores itself in its own, little area on iCloud Drive.
So within Scanner Pro, you're storing everything, or you're sending it out of Scanner Pro into some sort of folders hierarchy?
Scan it into there and it sits in there. But I also then move a copy out into an iCloud Drive file structure.
Yeah. Have you experimented with some of the apps that would OCR those scans so they're more searchable?
I haven't really. I just rely on a combination of tags and kind of naming conventions. So I don't really worry about too much about the content inside the document.
Okay. Another thing I believe you're kind of big into is photos. I mean, having a daughter would make you be into that as well, I would imagine.
Yeah.
What's that like entirely on iOS?
I've got about 26,000 photos in my iCloud photo library at the moment. And the vast majority of them have probably really been taken, as you say, since my daughter came around. And a lot of that is through just the iPhone. You can now move to get kind of the keyframe within the live photo, so you can get a really perfect shot, and the sound adds a lot of context to it, which is really good. And it's just so seamless of just pulling your phone out, taking a picture. It's all backed up. You don't have to worry about any of it with things like Google Photos. I have that as just kind of a backup to my backups, because everything I do is pretty much cloud-based. I don't have NAS backups. I'll keep it simple. And if something goes wrong with iCloud, there's Google Photos that you lose a bit of the quality, but they're still there just in case.
Yeah. For photo editing, you have a couple apps you mentioned in previous conversations, Darkroom, Pixelmator, and Infinity. How do you choose what tool to use for the job?
Just depends, I guess, on the situation and what I'm trying to do. So Pixelmator, the main thing I have Pixelmator for is the removal tool is very powerful in that. So if you've got like a picture of a field and there's a little cow in the middle of it or something, you can just rub over it and it's gone. It's really powerful.
Yeah, the magic, I forget what it's called, the magic eraser, I think. It's great.
It really is, that good of just hacking out. It's not even like tiny little things. It can clear out quite large chunks of a photo and clean stuff up. So I use it a fair bit for that. Darkroom is pretty much the go-to app for 90% of what I do, though. It's a really good RAW editor, so I use an app called Halide. I don't know if or Halide. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, to be honest, but I use that as my main RAW photo shooting app. I'm not sure why, but they've got kind of some sort of friendship between the two developers, I think. And within Halide or Halide, you can tap a button that jumps you straight into Darkroom. So they're kind of tied together like that. So it just works well, kind of jumping between the two.
Do you see a big benefit in capturing in RAW on iPhone versus the built-in camera app?
For 90% of the time, I don't bother when it's just sort of pictures of family and things like that.
And you'd lose the live photo that way as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's a big thing. It's really just, if I get a rare quiet moment to, I don't know, see a sunset or something, then it's worth doing it then, because it does capture a lot more. The processing the iPhone camera does is good for a lot of the time, but it can be quite kind of overzealous. It goes a bit over the top sometimes and you do lose quite a lot. But the iPhone software does the job perfectly most of the time, to be honest.
So at work, you mentioned you use your iPad for other things. What kind of things do you use it for?
I have the calendar synced into it, so I can obviously get my reminders to various meetings and different things, and reminders as well. So I jump around quite a lot. I think when we've discussed things before, I am was using Things quite heavily for various reasons. This is Things, the to-do app, not just generally things. I use that a lot. I have my laptop, so again, a Windows laptop at work that I do my day-to-day stuff on, but the iPad's always sitting next to me, usually just on, plugged in and on with a split screen of notes on one side and things on the other, or a to-do app. Like I said, I've been jumping around a little bit. I've recently started using an app called Good Task.
Okay.
Or Good Task 3, I think it's called. It basically sits on top of the reminders framework. It's good. Things is a weird app because it's advanced in a way, but very basic in others.
And they recently had a big keyboard update, right? Have you played much with that?
So that's what keeps me on it a lot. So as I mentioned, I've got the phone, I've got the iPad, and on the phone, Good Task is better because it hooks into the reminders system. When I'm on a PC at work, I can go to the iCloud.com website, and enter things there, and it all ties up. But the iPad with things and the keyboard is just so powerful. They've really gone kind of all out of getting a really good system in place. You can essentially do everything you want to do in the app, bar possibly one or two things without touching the screen at all.
And the controls are simple to understand, so it wasn't a huge learning curve to be able to do that?
There's still times when, when you hold the command button, it'll display all the shortcuts. There's so many, it fills, I think, 2 pages, and then you can click another shortcut that then loads up a website that has all of, even more shortcuts displayed. So there is a lot. But as you start using it, they do become muscle memory pretty much. And there isn't, a million and one things you can do in it. You're going to want to create a new task, mark one completed, change the time, jump between things. So you don't have to do, or the keyboard shortcuts don't have to do, a million things, but they do everything you would want to do.
Yep.
It just makes it a really compelling thing to use. To do apps and note-taking apps are my 2 app vices, I suppose, that I have so many notes scattered all over the place.
Something I'm curious about is Agenda. This is an app that got a lot of praise. I've not dug too far into it. Can you describe what you're using Agenda for? In
essence, it's a note-taking app like a million other things, but its kind of USP is that it hooks into your calendar, so you can do kind of calendar-based notes. I mainly use the Agenda for work. It hooks into my calendar, so if I have a meeting at, 1 o'clock that day, it will list it, in your calendar view. You can tap on the event, create a note kind of linked to that event. You can just enter notes like you would anything else, and you just have them all in there. But the notes that are tied to calendar events, you can just look back through. You had a meeting a week ago or something. You can go to that calendar date, click on it, and then or tap on it and get all your notes for that.
And the notes themselves are stored within the Agenda app, or is it a part of that calendar event now that's on your other calendar app?
No, it's not related to your calendar beyond just pulling in the information. So it's all within Agenda, and then it's synced via iCloud.
And is there a calendar view? Could you use that as your main calendar if you wanted to?
You can do. There's no, unless I'm just missing it, which is quite possible. There isn't to see a week or month view.
Okay.
You kind of swipe in from the side. It shows you your current day, and you can kind of go left and right, jump in between the two, or click the drop down and then just skip through a couple of weeks and jump into the day. But it's not really a calendar replacement. It would be good to kind of merge the two. It's got the connection to your calendars anyway, so it would make a lot of sense.
Do you use it for other purposes outside of meeting notes?
Not really. I say it's focused on that. It is its kind of key thing. When you first open it, it has a whole montage video at the beginning kind of explaining. It's all kind of focused on a calendar idea. Like I said, you can just throw any notes in you want, and they just sit there like any other note. It just doesn't have a link to a calendar event.
Okay, so you'll use that for meeting notes, and then Apple Notes, is that everything else pretty much?
It is, yeah. Again, I've jumped around quite a lot in the past for note taking, from kind of OneNote to Evernote, Notes, Bear, hundreds of other things. I'm trying to stop that because I do kind of contracting and stuff. I create notes on kind of things I've learned somewhere or something, and then when I move on, I forget where I've left that note across various different things. So I'm trying to stop leaving this little breadcrumb all around the internet of all my notes and things that I've learned over the years, and trying to keep everything centralized.
What do you like about Apple Notes?
The main thing is the reason why I keep kind of falling back to all the default apps like the calendar and reminders, or something at least that sits on that back end. It's all within that same ecosystem. Again, when I've used Evernote or whatever else, when I jump around, I lose track of where things are. With Notes, I can't see, unless something changes quite drastic in the next few years, me moving away from Apple stuff. So Notes as a system is pretty much always going to be around for me to find stuff in. The app itself, I kind of fell using it a lot more when the refresh happened. So they added the ability to use the pencil. So because it was essentially the first app that really took advantage of all the new features like drag and drop and pencil support and everything else.
Yeah, the pencil support's kind of baffling to me because I must just have huge handwriting, but unless the app supports me zooming in, it's just kind of useless for me. That's why I tend to gravitate towards GoodNotes, which I'm able to zoom in and write nice and big, and then when I zoom out, it's small again.
Yeah.
Are you better with that, not needing that kind of crutch that I do?
Yeah, I guess it depends on your use cases for the drawings. Like usually when I've had to do that, it's been to just kind of sketch out a thought about how I'm going to build kind of a solution for a client or something like that. It's always just been kind of a rough little sketch.
Mm-hmm. And the client work you're dealing with, so you're in marketing. Are you like sketching out kind of a campaign and what the steps are in that, or what kind of, is there an example you can provide?
It is marketing and it is kind of campaign focused, but it's kind of the back end of things. So the tool I use is used to like get selections of customers and things that are going to be targeted for an email or some sort of communication. They have things called welcome journeys. So various people, when you sign up to a service or something, 3 days after signing up, you'll receive an introduction email to tell you about the product or something like that. And then if you don't open it within 3 days, you get email X. If you do open it, but you don't click on a link in it, you get Y. It kind of spiders out, kind of a web from there or a flow. It's really just kind of rough sketches for me. It's not something I generally need to share with anyone else. So it's just kind of thoughts and things as I'm going along. In my day-to-day personal life, I don't really have any use cases for drawing in notes or anything. So again, notes kind of fits that quite well. Now, even the integration in Control Center, you can jump straight into a note. The integration with the system that keeps me coming back to it.
And do you find yourself organizing those notes in different folders, or how do you handle that?
I do, yeah. Similar to how I do kind of my reminders and stuff, I guess. It's, there's work, home, personal, family. So there's like shared notes or shared reminders. It works with both, and shared calendars actually for kind of family things. Started putting emojis in the names. It sounds stupid, but it gives it a lot of color and a lot of life.
Yeah.
So I do the same with, again, my reminders groups and note groups. It adds a nice little touch to it that helps kind of organize things. You don't have to worry about to read all the names of all the categories and folders you've got. You can just see, picture of a house that must be house related, home
Sure.
or whatever. It does make things a lot easier and just nicer to look at.
Something I was just thinking about, I would love if, as you're working in notes, if you're looking at a note, you could ask Siri, move this note to the home folder. That would be just so nice to just remove the need to drag stuff around.
That would be good. Even the things that are already there with do this don't work so well. If you're in an email and you say, remind me of this
it works sometimes.
Tomorrow or something. Yeah, I don't know how it can randomly work, but more frequently doesn't work. So I've just given up even trying with that, unfortunately.
It's a shame because the idea was you could archive an email and you could still have that email get reminded of, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not having any of it most of the time.
As we move ahead to drag and drop, how has that changed how you work on iPad?
Been, I guess, night and day, to be honest. That's when things really started kicking off for me and making it, a quicker thing to use. A lot of the time you can use an iPad. You could do what you wanted to do on it. You could get things done, but it's just moved from being something you can do on the iPad, but you're probably better off doing it somewhere else because you could just do it quicker, to just saying, I'll just do it on the iPad because that's the best way of doing it. Just you can chuck emails here, there, and everywhere, save stuff. It's changed things a lot. It's sped me up a lot. I always hear a lot of people that kind of use iPads a bit, but not really all that much, say that it's bad implementation or it's not as easy as it is on the Mac or something like that. There was some conversations going on earlier on Twitter today when I stupidly got involved in a conversation. A kind of thread came about with someone saying about there's no low-end Macs, and I just said maybe what they're going for at Apple is, that's what the iPad is filling. And I think it does for a lot of people.
It is right now, but I do think they should have a low-end MacBook Air with Retina that everyone would be happy with.
Yeah, it seems like a good gap.
But to your point, I think it's better than Mac because I've got 10 fingers. I can drag with one of them and then be navigating the system with another. If you're dragging a file on Mac, you got to be using that same pointer to navigate the UI, and that can get rough at times.
Yeah.
Especially on those trackpads on the Mac, which I have problems with, the 3D touch trackpads and trying to...
Yeah. That's literally what I was about to say, that trying to do that with the trackpad is painful. You drop it halfway to where you're trying to go, and I guess it's just what you're used to. And people that like their Macs, and I don't think there's any convincing them otherwise. Similar to we're saying, it's easier on an iPad because it is for us.
Oh yeah, and the whole idea of you are able to add things to a stack, that concept just does not exist with drag and drop on Mac. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's you pick it up and you better make sure you find where you're going, quickly before you run out of space on your trackpad and drop it in the middle of somewhere you don't want it to go.
Yeah, it's like, I ran out of space in my corner. I'm stuck. Which happens quite a bit. Yeah.
Your finger just drops off the edge.
Yeah. The thing that was really amazing to me was I do a lot with WordPress and just uploading images there. You're able to, without saving it to local storage, go to Google Image Search, drag an image from one browser tab, and directly upload it without saving it locally first, which is just fantastic.
Yeah, that's the thing. It just changes the way you go about doing stuff. That's exactly the sort of thing that was really painful on iOS before they added that, and now it's it's just so simple. And things like that, some people wouldn't even think to try because you just assume it wouldn't work.
Yeah,
it's surprising how many things do work, and things like even maps. If you drag maps information out, it's not necessarily just what you're dragging. It pulls information along with it. It could be an image of that location, or it makes like a V card, I think they're called, of that address and all sorts of things. And things like the sort of apps like Gladys, and I think there's one called Yoink, the like shelf apps. Gladys in particular, you pull similar to that, like I just said, you pull in a map location and it will drop in 6 different items within that shelf you can then pull out and use wherever you want.
Oh, I have got to try Gladys. I did not know about how it handled map data like that. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's smart. Like I said, it creates like the V card, a map location, and various other things. You can, within the options, you can pick if you want it to like stack them all together. So it just creates one item and then you can go into it and get what you want, or it will create an item.
Yeah, that seems especially handy if you're creating some kind of event invite, and then you'll have all that data that you can just drag all 6 points into the different part of the invite.
Exactly, and it does that with anything, I think, well, within reason, but like if you drag out a link, I think it will save the link as one thing, and the text, or if it's connected to some text, or if you pull out a group of text and drag that in, it'll keep the URL as a separate thing to the text.
Okay, yeah, I got to give Glass another shot, because I tried it initially and it didn't blow me away at first, so maybe they've had some updates there. Yeah,
possibly. I downloaded it at the time and have just sort of started getting into it a little bit now.
If you could commission Apple to make a new iOS form factor, what would you have them make?
Just a laptop form factor.
Would you want the screen to be removable still, or is part of it the improved balance of having the lightweight screen up top and the battery below?
No, I definitely still want it to come apart. So essentially what we can do now with an iPad, but just, I guess, a better, when it's kind of docked into its keyboard, it maybe more flexible in what you can do with it or something. I'm not sure. I think that's why Johnny Ive gets the millions and I'm stuck not getting millions. I'm not much of a designer, as you can tell from that wish.
If they could design something where you got a huge battery on the keyboard end of things as well as the iPad itself, you could have like a 20-hour battery life if they do it right.
Yeah, that's a good idea, yeah.
That'd be a really heavy iPad at the same time.
Yeah, true. Yeah, and then you're back to it's not as useful as just having a screen. It kind of loses its charm.
But then it could be your weekend device where you don't even need to bring a charger, which you mean there's potential.
Yeah, true. Yeah, anything that adds more flexibility the way people use it or more options is, all the better for me. Every argument about why iPads can never replace Macs always comes down to you can't use Xcode on it, which I think for 90% of people. If
you had Apple or some developer make an app for iPad, what would you have them make that doesn't exist today? Would it be Xcode or something more relevant to your own life?
I think I will go with Xcode just so people can move on to another reason why iPads can't replace desktops. That's about what 1% of iPad users would want. There can't be that many iOS developers in the world. But if that keeps people happy, I will go with that. The state of the the App Store and the apps that are created for iPads is another reason why I like it so much. There's always, even now, there's some really interesting, well-designed, good-looking apps that are coming out pretty much daily for iPads, and they're getting better and better. You're getting things like Photoshop coming out, and that's being developed at the moment, and things like Affinity Designer that came out a couple of weeks ago that are like desktop quality, professional almost applications on this device. I don't really know why people have this problem with just admitting, it's similar to like an iPhone isn't for everyone. There seems to be this thing, like, again, that I saw on Twitter with these conversations going back and forth, that because it's not for you, as in whoever's talking about it, it means it's not a replacement at all. It seems a bit strange.
Yeah.
Like I said, 90% of people don't use Xcode.
And you have to use different tools and applications to get the same job done, and some people aren't interested in learning a new way to do things if the current way works fine for them right now.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Something I've witnessed over the past couple of weeks is more and more Windows laptops with touchscreens, and me seeing those users be incredibly proficient at utilizing both aspects of that device, where they're presenting something to me and they're using that touchscreen in a really cool way. Then they got the mouse and keyboard. Yeah. They should probably add touch to the Mac at some point.
They are hanging on a long time with that. They're kind of creeping there with the touch bar. It's creeping towards the screen, but they're sticking to that one pretty. I don't know. I don't know why they're happy with people using iPads in essentially as a laptop. Their keyboard case makes it essentially a laptop idea, and you're obviously touching that majority of the time, and that seems fine for a lot of people. Like we said, sales are going up, so people are enjoying using that. So I don't know why it wouldn't work the other way around.
Exactly. Something that crossed my mind as we're talking about Xcode is if Apple did this, I think they'd probably release a lightning to lightning cable. So as you're executing code, you could use a second iPad hooked up to the other iPad to, run that code. I could see that being a thing, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't see why not. They can sell you 2 iPads then. Even better.
Yeah, and if that's a thing, I would love the inevitable future of hooking an iPad up to another iPad and having multi-display support in some crazy way. You can drag an app to the side and it has some indicator that I'm moving this to the other iPad. I don't know, there's potential for some crazy setups.
Yeah, absolutely. They could probably do that with wirelessly, you would hope.
You'd hope, yeah.
Just fling it to the other one. Little lightning to lightning dongle thing would be fun.
Closing out the show, I just want to ask about your new podcast. What is your new podcast, and what's your workflow for making that on iOS?
It's really new. It's a whole 2 episodes in so far.
Got to start somewhere.
Well, yeah, exactly. I signed up to something called micro.blog, basically like hipster Twitter. It's basically just paid for Twitter. So people don't just post the sort of things you would put on Twitter. It's a free thing. You just throw whatever on there. It's a little bit more thought out. And the way it works, it kind of creates everything you post in like your timeline, creates a post on a blog page as well. If you write over 280 characters, it turns it into an actual blog post, with a title and a view more thing. So you can kind of essentially use it to create a blog as well, which is quite handy. But that service also, for a couple of dollars extra a month, gives you access to uploading short form podcasts, or microcasts, I think they call it, which, because I've been looking to do a podcast for a while, but I don't really have anyone that would want to do it with me. It's my little sad violin in the background.
iPad Pros, same way. It's like, okay, let me start this, and turned out to be an interview show mostly, which is, I'm loving how that's turned out, which is great.
It's been great. I found the show not that long ago, really, and have been loving it. Similar to that idea, you find solutions, I guess, to the quote-unquote problem of having no one to do it with. I didn't want to just sit and talk to myself for an hour. Micro.blog is set up to allow sort of, maximum, I think, of like 20, 30 minutes for an episode. The idea was just, they're going to be short form anyway. It's a lot more manageable, I guess, to just find 10 minutes in a day. They're very basic. I don't do anything snazzy with theme tunes or anything like that. I use an app called Ferrite on the iPad. I hook up a Blue Yeti microphone to the iPad. You put a lightning in to power the microphone and charges the iPad at the same time, and then the USB to the microphone to give you that.
Yeah.
So I just record that in Ferrite. I maybe put like one little sound thing in I usually have like a chunk, like a 10-second little introduction, little noise, little sound of some kind, and then the rest of the podcast, save it and just upload it straight. You can do it on the web through the iPad, or there's an app from Micro.blog called Wavelength. So you just pick your audio, load it up. Part of the Micro.blog has a RSS feed, so you can supply that to iTunes and wherever else to get it online. So it literally takes 10 seconds to output the audio and have it online, all through the iPad. In terms of kind of content for it, I'm kind of loose on it at the moment. Like I said, I'm only 2 in, and it's just when I think of something I want to either get off my chest or talk about, or it's kind of free. It's going to be tech-based pretty much, because that's kind of where my interests are, and Apple-based.
What's it called, and where can people... I guess you search iTunes for it, but what's it called?
It's called Upload. There's about 20 different, as you'd expect, 20 different podcasts with that quite generic name. The blog and everything else can be found on, it's just andynicolaides.com.
Okay. And this will be in the show notes for those interested.
For those that can't spell my mouthful of a name. But yeah, if you go there, there's a link at the top.
Any other topics we didn't cover that you wanted to chat about before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's good.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being on. And once again, that URL for people to find you online?
It's just andynicolaides.com, and it's the same on Twitter. It's just at Andy Nicolaides. Like I said, check the show notes for the spelling. I won't spew it all out now.
Yeah, in the episode name, you will have your last name and the title of this episode as well. So thank you so much, Andy.
Great, thank you. And you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of iPad Pros. You can find the show notes over at iPadPros.net. You can send your feedback to me at iPadProsPodcast@gmail.com. If you email a voice memo, I'd be happy to include your audio in a future episode. I'm on Twitter at iPadProsPodcast. And as mentioned at the top of the show, I'd really appreciate it if you could support me over at patreon.com/iPadPros. Thank you for your time and attention today. Talk to everyone again real soon.